Everyone, my name is Gary Cox. I'm the reference archivist for the University Archives at the University of Missouri. And today I wanted to tell you a little bit about the University Archives holdings, how to access the physical and digital resources held in the University Archives, and maybe provide some advice on strategies for conducting primary source research. One of the things I want to point out is due to the nature of our materials being, a lot of it being one of a kind and non-circulating, some of the information I'm going to be sharing is more catered to people who can come to our reading room and do research. But I'm also hopefully going to provide some information on some of the things we have on our website that would help people who maybe not have those opportunities. I guess I should start out with who we are, where we are, and what we do. So I decided to start with the University Libraries website, and if you click on this libraries term in the header, you can find University Archives on the drop down, and this is our home site, homepage. A little bit about the archives. We're a 3-person operation right now. We do have a student worker, but Anselm Hulsbergen is our technical services archivist and our interim university archivist. I'm the public services archivist. And then Chris Anstein is our assistant, archives assistant. He helps Anselm with some stuff. He handles a lot of reference for people, and he answers the general line if you decide to give us a call and want to do some research. We're open 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. We do have a map here that shows where we're located, but I went ahead and pulled up the campus map so that you can get an idea of where we are in relation to some of the other buildings. So if you're coming from the Jesse Hall area, I'm sure you know where that is, at the Alumni Center, we're sort of, I guess, southwest of those locations, down at the corner of Rollins and Providence, sort of on the corner of Greektown. As far as what we do, our mandate is to collect, preserve, and make accessible records created and received in collection or in connection with the transactions of university and university system business. The Archives is also authorized to solicit personal papers, manuscripts, and organizational records that enrich the historical understanding of the university and the university system. It's important to know a few things about the history of the University Archives. One thing is that we were established in 1969, and we were a system office at the time. There was one Archives in Lewis Hall, where we are today. In 1991, the archives became decentralized when they decided that they needed an archivist on each campus. So before that time, we collected the records of University of Missouri system in Columbia campus, and then all the records were facilitated from that location. Another thing that's important to note is that the university system was established in the early 60s, around 1963 and 1964. So at that point, we kind of became a split repository, and hopefully I'll be able to show you that with some of the record group holdings that I will pull up for you. Before we were established, the State Historical had a collection called the Western Historical Manuscript Collection. They still have a manuscript collection, but it's under a different name. And Elmer Ellis, the person this library is named after, he was one of the presidents who encouraged a lot of faculty to put their records in the historical manuscript collection before the University Archives was established. So a lot of researchers that do research in the archives, they also need to be aware of Western Historical Manuscript Collection. As far as some of the resources that you might be able to use, I'm going to click on the holdings just to give you an idea. I mentioned that it's a split repository. So at the system level, you have all the different university system offices, and a lot of the materials we have are under the record groups of the Board of Curators. I'll go ahead and click on that. And these would be records that go all the way back to 1839, when the university was established, and they were trying to figure out information on constructing the facilities and getting the faculty organized and everything. So this would be one of the most important record collections for researchers that want to look at materials going all the way back to the beginning of our campus. What you're looking at here is one of our inventory collections. We try to put some information at the top that is relevant to the time frame that you're doing the research in. So this collection actually has a pretty broad range, 1839 to 1868. It's 1 1/6 cubic foot, and the information is also microfilmed, so we can provide the information pretty quickly in our reading room if you're available to come by and take a visit, make a visit. The way people convey the information to me on what they need to look at is the call number, and that on the inventory finding aids, that information is over here in the sidebar. The UW141 is the call number for this particular collection. So if you do come across this information by using the embedded Google search on our website or what have you, if you can tell me the collection number, and if possible, the box number in the file folder that you want to look at, that would be useful. So this is an example of one of our finding aids for a inventory collection. We also have summary descriptions that are usually a little less, they're less descriptive, but sometimes it's because of the nature of the materials. Sometimes the title of the collection and the date range, if it's a short date range or it's only a cubic foot box or something, we'd be pulling in the collection anyway, the whole collection. So we sometimes just have a series description, and in that case, the call number that we would need from the researcher is embedded into the series description. The other information about the size of the collection and where it's located, that helps us. That's more of an internal tool for us helping people, researchers. I'm going to jump over to the campus side to give you an idea of the arrangement of the records on the campus side of our collections. Starting with the University General, then we have administrative records, the faculty, and then you've got record groups for all the different schools and colleges. And just for an example, record group 5 would be human environmental sciences. And one thing I'd like to point out to people pretty early on is when you're doing research on historical material, you need to know what terminology to use for the time frame, and you need to know what time frame you're looking at, and you want to know key individuals that you want to be looking for when you're, Googling our site or what have you, or some of the other resources I'm going to show you. For that reason, we do provide a historical note for a lot of these collections that kind of give you information. And in this particular one of the most important things that you need to be aware of would be like this last paragraph that provides the information that originally human environmental sciences was called home ec. So if you're searching human environmental sciences before, I guess, 1988, you're not going to find anything. The other thing that's important to note is because it was part of the College of Agriculture until it became its own an independent school, a lot of the early records for human environmental sciences are going to be located in the College of Ag record groups. So that's something I'd like to point out. Again, I mentioned that the site is keyword searchable, so I'm just going to kind of show you an example of a search. I'm searching information on Curtis. There's a building named after him, so some of the brick and mortar, the exhibit that I will show you that is specifically about buildings, that's popping up in our search. But there's also something I want to show you. As far as the materials that we collect, it can vary by all kinds of different formats. A lot of it's paper documents. More and more it's becoming more electronic. We have a lot of photographs, architectural records, plans and blueprints, audio materials, including oral histories, music from Marching Mizzou. We have a 10-year run of recordings from a radio program called University Close-Up, where they talk to a lot of faculty during and visitors from the 60s and 70s that get a lot of use. We have a lot of video formats and film formats. A lot of that's athletics, promotional films for campus and departments, and another program that we have both audio and video recordings called University Forum, that was kind of more topical on local topics of interest with the government and what's going on with the school and the university and things of that nature. But we also collect memorabilia from individuals. And as I mentioned, Curtis, a lot of things, the building's named after him. He was here, he came here in 1900 as a professor of zoology, eventually became the Dean of Arts and Science. And this is just an interesting, what I would call a graphical collection that we have from Curtis. When he was called in 1925 to be key witness to what they called the Scopes monkey trial. It was a trial, a pretty famous trial in the early 1920s or 1900s, revolving around the argument about evolution. And he just was on site, and he just collected everything he found, all the pamphlets and brochures and articles about the trial. And you know, they called it a monkey trial, but it really was kind of a circus, everything that was going on in Dayton at that time, and it was making national news. But he was on site, and he collected a lot of information, and that's just an example of a scrapbook that we have that is pretty interesting. As far as other information we have on our website to help researchers, we've created topical guides to help flesh out just specific information that might be of use to people. A listing of all the honorary degrees of recipients that we've had through the years, by date and by last name, alphabetized. I mentioned brick and mortar. This is something that a lot of development officers and architectural study students would want to look at. It has information on all the different buildings, the major buildings, the ones that have a name on them. Some of the smaller buildings may not be on here, and we are planning to add some materials to this. This is actually a grant project that was done by Campus Facilities, but it's become under our curatorship. So. And the reason they gave it to us is because a lot of the information came from the university archives. A lot of these older photos and a lot of the historical information. But if you need information about when a building was constructed, designed, they don't know. This is Academic Hall. It was built in 1830 or 1840. So it's not going to be as rich in information. Some of the architectural drawings aren't going to have electrical schematics and things of that nature that you would find in some of the older buildings, but the links, you know, they usually have pretty good pictures of what we have from the university, and our photo collections don't get very rich until about 1910, when cameras became more of consumer items, and even students had cameras and were taking pictures. This just happens to be a picture of the interior of Academic Hall, the library, and I guess State Historical Society would have been in that space at the same time. So going back from brick and mortar, another resource that Topical Guide that gets a lot of use would be our student unrest, and it just covers a lot of activities by students that were going on. A lot of it's from the 60s, but it varies from the 50s and the 70s. And one of the reasons we created a topical guide for this is because the information is so scattered. It's just a folder here and there that might be held by the university president, the police department, the chancellor's office, or even what used to be the dean of students. Now I think that'd be student affairs would be the position, is what it's called, what it would be called now. But anyway, this is just a quick way to get to various folders that we have on topics that, and this gets used pretty heavily by student researchers. And it does have the information as far as the collection of where the materials are held and the box and file folder. So anybody that sends me an email, if you want to provide that information, that's kind of how I would pull the materials together for you. We also have format guides that identify all the materials that we have. For this one, it's film and video. It's not necessarily all film and video. Like the films we have from the athletics, that's the only thing that's in the collection. But sometimes, like the promotional films might be held in the records of an individual, and it's just a way of getting to those materials that might not be fleshed out as easily just by searching our site. The same thing with photographs. We have a lot of materials, graphical materials, photographs that are scattered throughout various collections, system offices, as well as campus, and then recorded sound, three-dimensional objects. As far as individuals that want to make use of our resources without coming in to view the materials on site, we have this link to the various materials that we've had digitized. And I'll start with the Savitar. This would be the yearbook of the university. It goes from 1891 to, I think, 2006. And it really just provides a yearly kind of snapshot of what was going on with student organizations, a little bit about departments and athletics, homecoming, and very rich in photographs and information from the student's point of view. But anyway, there's different ways of accessing this collection. One, you can scroll down and browse and select, if you know the year that you want to be researching, you can just click on it and browse through the materials. We do have the Savitars in our reading room. They're easily accessible for anybody who comes in to do research. This interface is kind of new as of, I think, January, when we switched over to this MoSpace repository. So I'm still learning the ins and outs of this, but one of the things I can tell you is if you start with the default field of title, you're not going to get a lot of results. I usually go down to the text field and then I do a search and then go from there. Another collection that is very helpful for doing research throughout the years would be the Missouri Alumnus. It's actually went through different names through the years. Now it's Mizzou Magazine, but we have it digitized almost up to the current titles, going back to when it started in 1905. With this particular one, I've found it best to click on the community. Again, I'll just to show you how the results are displayed in this one. It's a little different than the Savitar. It pops up a PDF, and then you would need to open the PDF. And then I'm not sure if this computer is set up with the reader to, oh, there we go. Okay. So this is the actual PDF, the alumnus. And then when I'm trying to find my search topic, I just do a Control F search. So, and then you see that on page 2, there's a note or an article about Curtis Hall. It's a little slow right now, but, and then there you have the actual page of the article. And I think it gives you a little summary about who Curtis is, why they named the collection or the building after him. So the Alumni Magazine is a very useful, it can be a little tricky to search, but it is a useful resource for finding information. If you know the date range of the material you're looking at, or you have a certain individual's name, or a topic, a keyword search to use. University catalogs. This is another collection with yet another interface. This one is provided through the HathiTrust. It's not actually materials scanned out of the archives. We do have all of these catalogs on in our reading room, both in hardcover and in microfilm. But if you can't make it into our reading room, Cornell University has digitized a run of them. So has the University of Illinois. And basically I use this to share information with people from 1868 up to 1922. And you'll find a lot of these resources that are online. They do stop around 1922 for copyright reasons. The thing about the catalogs at that time, they were a pretty self-contained document with everything about the university. At that time, you could get information on all the faculty, the reports from each department on the buildings, the facilities, you know, what they're teaching. There's the course schedules would actually be in the catalogs, and then there's a list of students in the back. The early catalogs, predating the university system, they would cover the Missouri School of Mines, which is now Missouri S&T. Back in the 1800s, with the Morrill Act, when the School of Mines was started, it was just a school within, as part of the Columbia campus. And then when the system was started, they sort of became their own entity, along with UMKC and St. Louis. So that's the catalog. The Show Me magazine is just a humor magazine that was put out by students on campus from 1920 to I think the mid-60s. So like the Savitar, it's going to be the students' take on things, but there are some information and photographs and everything of events that took place on campus. Tiger Claws is from the old University High School and the lab school that was in the College of Education, what is now where the college actually is in Townsend Hall. That used to be a high school and elementary school, and it existed from the early 1900s to the 1970s. We have all their yearbooks, and they have a pretty strong alumni following that use those materials quite frequently. Mutation is a yearbook of the School of Medicine, the School of Nursing. One thing about it, I mentioned, you kind of need to use the terminologies of the time when you're doing historical research. You'll find that the sense of humor in these publications from earlier, they're a little bit different. In the Mutations, you'll see a lot of pictures where they have posed photos with skeletons and a lot of innuendos and things like that. So a lot of what you'll find in these publications probably wouldn't make it by the student publication boards today. And then we just have a run of university department histories for the schools and colleges, starting with the business and public administration, and it works pretty similar to the alumnus. It's just going to pop up a PDF that you, if it's fairly long, you might want to do a control F search if you're looking for a specific individual or topic or a date. And that, again, every time we find a history that's more of a published document, we'll try to scan it to make it available to researchers online. Going back to Curtis, this is a memoir that was written by Curtis in 1957 after he had been a professor with zoology and a dean of arts and science. Just to show you how I made use of this, we celebrated the 100th anniversary of the construction of Ellis Library a couple years ago, and I was wanting to see what, since Curtis came around and became a professor at the university a few years before that, I was just curious what he had to say about the library in his time here. So, and this is what I found. It's just information. Come to find out, he did live on this block before the university purchased it in 1913 to build the library. It doesn't give a very flattering, if you read the paragraph, it doesn't give a very flattering account of the location. He talks about open privies. They had plumbing, but there were still some open privies, and down at the bottom he mentioned they moved after two members of the family contracted typhoid. So it's you never know where you're going to find information in these documents we have digitized. Degrees conferred is something I use quite a bit when individuals want to find out about graduate students, when they maybe got their master's or graduate degree and what their dissertation was. Some of this information you can get through the catalog in the library as well, but this information is presented a little differently. Sometimes these documents are a little handier depending on what you're looking for. Another resource that if you're going to do research on the university is the student and local newspaper, the Columbia Missourian. It was started in 1908. Some of the editions have been digitized through the Missouri Digital Heritage, or provided to the Missouri Digital Heritage. I think they all come from microfilm that is in the State Historical Society. But anyway, it's just a little different interface for information about local happenings. I usually use this one for information I want to know of from 1966 to 1985. I don't do the 1908 or 9 too much because the Chronicling America website kind of serves the same purpose, and I'll show you that one as well. They also have the MSU Independent, which was a student newspaper. They have editions from 1894 to 1905. We actually have print copies in our holdings that I think go up to about 1909. So that's not the extent of the MSU Independent. We have those materials that extend a few more years. We also have the Maneater, the current student newspaper, and before that it was the Missouri Student. We have that material on microfilm that's available for researchers in our reading room. I mentioned Chronicling America as a resource for the University Missourian from the time it started in 1908 up to 1922 or thereabouts. Again, they stopped, I believe, for copyright reasons. The thing about the Chronicling America you got to be careful with is it changed its name quite a bit in the early years. Originally it was University Missourian and the Daily Missourian and so on. So even though it goes up to 1923, if you go on the website and you do an advanced search and you grab just the title, the University Missourian or whichever, you might be only searching that subset, which is fine if you know for sure that you are if you know for sure that it happened before 1916, it's okay. But what I usually do is I just go ahead and do a search for Missouri, and then I just filter out all the newspapers that pop up from Kansas City or St. Louis or St. Joseph, just to give you an example. Let's see what pops up for Farmers Fair. So again, as I expected, most of the articles are going to be from the Columbia Missourian or the Evening Missourian or the University Missourian, because that's an event pretty specific to this campus. I sort of expected that you might see publications from Kansas City or what have you, but anyway, this is what you come up with, and it's a pretty good resource, and it's pretty easy to use. I like the way it highlights the actual search term that you're looking for. It's, if you're searching a more common term, it's going to take a little more searching, and you'll probably get a lot more hits from other locations. I mentioned the brick and mortar. The Sanborn maps are the fire insurance maps. They're color-coded maps that they usually just use them. Insurance companies would use them to determine the risk of fire for various buildings in a town. So the color coding would tell you whether the building is brick or wood or what it's constructed of, which obviously had impact on how fireproof it was. I'm hoping, but I'm just going to pop up a general one so you get an idea of what it looks like. And this one, it shows you the date. I think some of them are going to pop up in this collection that are of later date. I think as far as like 1930, you can find some information. And if you're lucky, you know, some of the structures, it just tells you what the structure is made of by the color key. But then some of them do tell you what resided in that location. The old University High School moved around in different places before Townsend Hall was built, and they put the high school there. So I have made use of the Sanborn maps to figure out where that is. There used to be a university clubhouse for, I think, faculty that was sort of, I don't know, it kind of looked like similar to the YMCA that was here. And I used the Sanborn maps to figure out where that was located as well. So it is useful particularly if you're going to extend the search for locations outside of the university campus. I might just have to quit on this one and go back to our site this way. Okay, so some of these documents towards the bottom of our digital collections, they're very specific to various departments, ag extension bulletins, bulletins from journalism, School of Journalism. The Switzer History of Boone County, it's pretty interesting for those of you that are familiar with campus. Switzer, there's a building on the quad named after Switzer. He was a newspaper man. He was a member of the board of curators, and he was kind of Rollins' right-hand man, Rollins being the one they consider the father of the university. That's kind of why he's got a picture of Rollins on the beginning of his history. But due to his connections with the university, a lot of this book, I mean, there's a lot of information about the county in general, but I'd say a third of it is on the establishment of the university. And as of yet, there's about 3 other university histories, but I don't know of any of them being digitized. So this would be a good resource for the early ones. I mentioned the fact that some of our materials overlaps with what you would find at Western historical manuscripts, what is now the manuscript collection at State Historical. Just to give you an idea of how it would break down. Again, there's a building named after Walter Williams, so some of our initial hits are from the brick and mortar project. But this would be a collection that we have from Walter Williams, memorabilia from 1931 to 1935. And this would be from the time he was president of the university. If you don't know Walter Williams, he was president of the board of curators, and then he started the journalism school in 1908, and then later he became the university president. So this is an example, just a finding aid for the materials that we have. It's got the biographical note, some notes to the archivist about the materials, what you're going to find in the various series, breakdown of the collection, and then the actual links to the series and the item descriptions. But if someone comes to me and says they want to research Walter Williams, I have to make sure that they are aware. Let's see. I just kind of want to show you how to get over from the MU Library's website, how to get over to the State Historical Society's website. Now, obviously, if you're going to be doing research over the, at State Historical, you want to talk to one of their manuscript specialists. But I sometimes point people to stuff that I know is residing over there. Again, University Archives didn't exist until 1969, so some of the materials for the early presidents you're going to find over there. So what I usually use mostly is their manuscript collection. I don't really have much experience with the other collections, but just to give you an idea. You'll see that there's a few different collections that are attributed to Walter Williams and his wife Sarah Lockwood Williams. So I try to make a point to let people know that some of the materials are going to be in our holdings, but you also need to be aware that State Historical is also a good resource for a lot of university materials. Trying to look through my notes to see if I missed anything. As far as anyone who is looking to do research on site, I mentioned our hours are 8 to 5 Monday through Friday. Again, our materials, a lot of it's one of a kind and it's non-lending, so the materials have to be used in our reading room. We ask that you don't bring food or drink when you come to the archives reading room, and if you do bring personal items, we'd probably have you keep them away from our tables where we have the materials out for you to use. We do provide services for scanning and photocopying for a fee. A couple of things, I mentioned the Topical Guide, how it had a lot of information about student activities, protests, and whatnot. Some of that material, along with others, there are some restrictions on some of the materials we have. Anything from the anything that has to do with legal correspondence, legal advice from the General Counsel's office, any kind of student disciplinary records, or anything pertaining to promotion and tenure of faculty, or any kind of grievances by faculty or staff. That information is not available. Another thing to keep in mind, a lot of our materials is stored off-site. About 80%, I think, is the figure, and we get a delivery from the Record Center location once a day. So, and sometimes we need time to pull the materials together. They're not always stored in the same location. As I mentioned, some collections might have photographs, some of them might have blueprints, some of them might have paper, and then some of them might have maps, and all of those materials might be stored in various places for various reasons. Sometimes it's for environmental concerns. You know, we try to keep film and photographs in a cooler, humidity-controlled environment. So I guess what I'm getting at is it can take us a while to pull the materials together. So if you do show up in our reading room and just want to do some general research, get some general information from us, one of the resources that I should have mentioned is the vertical files. And these are a good starting point for a lot of the research that is conducted in the archives, and it runs topically from everything from academic misconduct down to, I think, YMCA. But these are just topics that a lot of people come in and ask for information on. We've got folders on all of the chancellors and the presidents, the current ones, and the presidents from before we had chancellors, so before we became a system in 1964. lot of information on athletics. Again, a lot of this is secondary sources, newspaper clippings that we've found over the years. But sometimes we have specific documents that sort of answer a question, like, for instance, when was faculty council formed? If I find a good document that explains that, I will make a photocopy of it, put the collection number on it, and stick it in the vertical files. So if someone's going through them, they'll know to ask me to look for that collection for more information on the topic. But anyway, when people come in and they might just need to know a little bit of information about a building or an individual, a lot of times these vertical files, this general information, it'll answer their question. Sometimes it gives them terminology, the dates of when things happened or the names of key people involved, so they can then take their search further into our collections to find more in-depth information about the topic. And that's one thing I'd like to point out when you're doing primary source research. It is good to start broad and get those information, your terminology, your people involved, and your date ranges, because it can be frustrating if you look at documents, primary source documents that are very dense material, and you don't know yet what is relevant to your research, and then trying to remember, oh man, I saw that paper, but I can't remember which collection it was. So you really want to try to start general, with your secondary sources and kind of narrow down to the specifics. And if the research is ongoing, that's what our staff is for. Specific questions that come up. A lot of these folders will bring up more questions than they answer, and sometimes we know, or we should know, some of the resources to point you to. So I'm trying to think if I overlooked anything else. Another resource that we make available online are these online exhibits. These are just topical exhibits that student interns, some of our student workers, and some of our staff have put up over the years. And some of these websites do date back to when the website was started in the 1990s. So they might look a little dated, but the information is still good. The photographs are cited, so I can locate them. And we do get a lot of requests from the photographs that pop up in these various exhibits. This, for example, is the picture of the first homecoming game against Kansas in 1911. So it's just, it tries to give, the purpose is to give people an overview of a certain activity or things that happen on campus. And a lot of times if somebody shoots me an email and asks about something, I can say, well, I know, this exhibit on athletics for women, the history of Women's Athletics Association, probably is going to answer their question. I think this photo is interesting because this is the basketball team from 1900, and we didn't have a men's basketball team until 1907. So it's kind of interesting, and I've talked to an individual at the Basketball Hall of Fame, and he kind of thought that was unusual, that we had the basketball team, the women before the men. This is just a picture of the swim events that took place in McKee Gym. There used to be a pool in the basement, or in the ground floor. So anyway, I hope I've given you some resources to use to kind of poke around and learn stuff about our collections. And I think I'm going to sign off now. So I appreciate you listening to my presentation. Thank you.